Hey Ken, this is Greg. It is February 1st. We made it all the way through January. February 1st, 2022. Going to cover two chapters today, and we might give an abbreviated version of one of them. Covering chapters 15 and 16 today. I'm getting my notes in order, that's why I'm not looking at the camera. But anyway, yesterday and today, my class covered both of those. We covered half of 15 yesterday. We covered the second half today, and all of 16 today. Chapter 16 in particular is from the point in the movie, especially, where it's just so poignant, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But let's talk about chapter 15 already. Of course, Aunt Alexandra has just showed up to town, and that spells trouble for Scout especially, because Aunt Alexandra's one goal is to make Scout a respectable young lady, where she'll quit wearing pants and she'll quit rolling around in the dirt and playing with, outside and stuff like that. And it just goes completely against Scout's nature. And Scout doesn't realize that yet, but she finds out soon anyway why Aunt Alexandra is there. The explanation Atticus gave, your aunt and I thought that you might need a little extra guidance during the upcoming hot summer. And of course, that was a play on words for him. He didn't know, temperature-wise, he didn't know it was going to be hot. But obviously what he was talking about was the upcoming trial concerning Tom Robinson and how the town's going to be heated and people are just going to be on edge and stuff like that. That's really what he was talking about. Early in chapter 15, Atticus makes a statement to his kids. And it's a statement that just kind of solidifies that Atticus is really in charge of his family. The kids should have no doubt whatsoever who's the boss in this family. And it's, concerning Aunt Alexandra, I think, if I recall right, this was yesterday we read it, Scout had replied to something that Alexandra was supposed to reply to. Atticus had asked her, and so Scout replied in advance, and Atticus told her to stop. But he made this statement here. He said, you are to do as Calpurnia tells you, you're to do as I tell you, and you're to do as your Aunt Alexandra tells you. So all the hierarchy here, the rules are coming down from Atticus, and he's leaving no doubt whatsoever that his word is going to go, and there's not going to be any debate about it. And in his place, if he's not there, if Calpurnia tells him something to do, as the Latin phrase, in loco parentis, which means in place of parents, Calpurnia she is acting in place of Atticus if Atticus is not there. And so therefore they are to obey her just as they would their daddy. And at the same time, Aunt Alexandra is there, and you don't obey her because she's your aunt. You're obeying her because I tell you so, and when I'm not here, she's in my place. She's taking my place. So anyway, that kind of settles it. The kids don't like that, but that kind of settles things as well as it can be. A little bit later in that chapter, Jim and Scout get in a fight. It's an actual fight up in the bedroom. And they're just going to a hammer and tong. And Atticus finally comes in, as they expected him to, and breaks it up. And he tells them, whatever you're fighting about, just stop, get over. He asks them who started, and they both point to each other, just like kids always do, and sometimes adults as well. But anyway, he's at the end, Scout asked him, do I have to mind Jim now like I do you and Calpurnia and Aunt Alexandra? And Atticus kind of got a smirk on his face, had a smile going there. He says, I'll tell you what, Scout. He said, I'll give you the exact quote from it. You mind Jim whenever he can make you. What a wonderful piece of parenting that was here. He didn't give him a direct answer, but his answer struck home to both of those children, both to Scout and to Jim. Scout knew that she could hold her own against Jim, and Jim knew that Scout could hold her own against him as well. So, I mean, Atticus understood they weren't going to kill each other, but at the same time, yeah, even as Jim is getting older, he is not an adult figure. I mean, he kind of is to Scout just because he's older, but he's not on the same level. You know, you do an organizational flow chart, and you have Atticus at the top, and then you have Calpurnia and Alexander under them, and then down below, somewhat further, is Jim, but he's not Scout's boss. So I thought he just gave such a great answer there. Once again, you mind Jim whenever he can make you. I still chuckle every time I read that one. Part of this chapter that I found rather humorous, and my kids rather like this as well, is the part where Dill is underneath the bed hiding. He's run away from home, and he is hiding, and you know, Scout steps on him, doesn't know it's him. She thinks it's a snake under the bed, and so she calls. Of course, this is after Jim and Scout's fight, but what does she do? She calls for Jim. And if you go back just a little bit, after Atticus left, after he told Scout, you mind Jim, whatever he can make you, I'm sure that left Jim stinging a little bit, but Jim went to his room, and what did he say? Good night, Scout. I mean, you know, they're brothers and sisters. They love each other. So anyway, Scout thought she'd stepped on a snake underneath her bed. She came and got Jim, and he wasn't going to get down there and climb under there, and you know, if there was a snake under there, he went and got a broom, and he put the broom under it and kind of swiped it around and got nothing out. And then he did it again, got it further. Scout said, do snakes growl? All right. And then Dill came out from underneath the bed and said he was one of the filthiest human beings she had ever seen. And later Atticus said, you know, you need to get rid of some of our county. He was referring to how dirty Dill was. So anyway, Dill had this story, and every story Dill tells, you know, you can't believe any of it. So he had this wild story of how he got there, and he rode the train, and had the conductor take care of him, and then he rode in a wagon part of the way, and he stole $13 out of his mother's purse. And I mean, just elaborate. You know, his imagination does not stop. At one point, you know, Scout said, Jim can read twice as fast as I can. He's a whiz in math, but he chooses not to use those things. But he uses imagination much greater. I can't tell you how many students I've taught like that. And sometimes just getting them to focus on, you know, what's really important, you know, in class is sometimes a challenge, because they're sitting there drawing a picture of, I don't know, of something or whatever. And I'm not putting down drawing pictures. I mean, some kids are very talented in that, and I'm not. However, when you're in class and we're talking about English or literature, then your focus needs to be on that, in spite of what current educational policies tell us. I'm still too old to go along with that. All right, I don't allow kids to doodle or have other. I never allow students to work on other things in my class, and I never have time left over at the end of class. I overplan. You know, I always make sure I have too much to do during the day, so that you know, the bell rings every class period that I have, and that's what we're in the middle of working. So anyway, but she's, you know, making the comment about Dill, how he chooses to use his imagination, and I have absolutely nothing against imagination. I've got a great imagination, and I encourage it in my children, but knowing when to put it to esse and knowing when to turn it off, you know, that is important. So anyway, Dill is there, and it says Jim, then he did something that Scout didn't approve of. Jim went and got Atticus and told him that Dill was there. And of course, that was the right thing to do. Jim's getting older, he is getting more mature. That was the absolute right thing to do. You know, Dill's parents had to be scared to death. You know, he'd run away and everything, and his Aunt Stephanie needed to know that he was there. And Atticus went over, you know, and brought her back and, you know, squared things away, and Dill was going to stay a week. Which means that Dill is going to be in town for the trial, and that's a pretty important thing. The trial, you know, this was a Sunday, or this was a Saturday during this chapter, and he was being brought. Tom Robinson was being brought back to Macomb on Sunday, being kept overnight in the jail. Of course, they kept him out of town for his own safety, as chapter 16 demonstrates. And then the trial system was going to start on Monday. They didn't have all these long delays. One of the main reasons that Scout finally got out of Dill why he ran away, he said he just didn't feel like he was wanted. And I just made myself a note here. That's really kind of a basic human need. Everybody needs to feel like they're important or they're wanted, regardless of what they do or what job they have or their capacity to function in a classroom or whatever. But everybody needs to feel like they're part of something that's important, and that's one of the challenges of being a teacher. You have kids in class that you just automatically love, and you have to be careful not to shower too much attention on them, and you have to make sure you don't neglect the ones that are on the fringe, both society-wise and academic-wise. Not everybody's a genius, and that's a challenge at times, finding things for the kids who are not as gifted or talented as many other people in the rest of the class, finding something that they can do and do well and you can commend them on. And that's something I've had to learn over the years. I do a pretty good job of it now. But again, it's easy to pay attention to the people that you really like and that are nice and that are easy to get along with. And it's sometimes a lot more challenging to be nice and to be kind to people who are not naturally nice people or who are just quiet people. It's a challenge for me at times if I got a real quiet student in class, even if they're a good student, that I just don't neglect them. I just don't overlook them. And that's the way Dill felt here. His parents, his mother remarried, and his parents are now, his mother and his stepfather are they're enamored with themselves, and they're spending all their time on themselves. And they're just not paying much attention to Dill, and that's why he feels like he's rejected or whatever. I think it's this chapter. I made a note here. Alexander's view of the Finch family. Remember Jim tried to correct her about that cousin, whatever, St. Josiah or St. John, or whatever, Joshua, St. John, something or another. And he tried to correct her because he'd been in jail, and Aunt Alexander, even though she knew it was true, she didn't want to hear it. And we get a glimpse of Aunt Alexandra's upper class viewpoint of the Finch family. She believes that the Finches are the best or one of the best families in all of Macomb and all of Macomb County. And that's one of her reasons that she came to live, not just to look after the kids during the trial, the trying time, but also she really wanted to make something out of Scout. In her worldview, Scout, the way she was not acceptable. She was not a lady. She was not on track to be a lady. She wore pants at a time when girls didn't wear pants. She played in the mud and rolled around, and she could fight her brother. And those were things that were all unladylike in Aunt Alexandra's eyes. And that really got Jim and Scout rather upset. And Atticus came up, and he really fumbled the ball on this one, but he caught himself and he recovered. He fumbled the ball. He was trying to tell them about Aunt Alexander in so many words. He wasn't saying the same thing that I just said. And then finally, when Scout started crying, when Jim looked like he was going to start crying, and Scout just went and buried her head in Atticus' stomach, Atticus just said, "Just tell you what, you all just do whatever you're doing. It doesn't make any difference to me. I enjoy you the way you are." At the end of this chapter, Scout brings up Boo Radley again to Dill. Of course, my kids got a kick out of this one. This part. Dill was going to sleep with Jim, but after a little while, he sneaked back into Scout's room, and he said, "I want to sleep in your bed." All right, and of course, my kid, 8th grade kids, of course, are snickering and everything. I said, "Look, they're 8-year-old kids. He's coming to bed to sleep, and that's all he wants to do there." And at the end of this chapter, they're both falling asleep. But right at the end, Scout makes an observation or makes a comment about Boo Radley. He says, and I lost the place here, wrong chapter. That was probably the chapter before. Now, anyway, she asked and said, "Why do you think Boo Radley hasn't come out?" And Jim just made the statement. Dill just made the statement. Well, maybe he had no place place to go. As compared to Dill, even though Dill felt left out, he thought he had a place to come. He could come back with Scout and Jim and the Finches and his aunt as well. All right, then this last chapter. Oh, that's why I couldn't find it. I was on the wrong page. I was on the last chapter. Anyway, but I basically said what Dill had said. All right, Tom Robinson is returned to Macomb. It was on a Sunday. He was going to be returned to Macomb, and the trial was going to start on Monday. It was going to start bright and early, which is pretty amazing. You get the guy here, then you start the trial. So he's returned to the Macomb jail, and of course he's kept in another jail.